In Chapter 6 of Giving Reasons, Morrow talks about charitable and uncharitable interpretations of different claims. Since I'm going to be asking you to provide your own charitable and uncharitable interpretations of different philosophical claims, I'm going to give you some examples here of claims from the history of philosophy, together with charitable and uncharitable interpretations. The first one comes from the ancient Greek philosopher Thales, who famously said, "All is water." Now, I could interpret this in a very uncharitable way by saying that Thales, that idiot, thought that all reality was water, that only water is real, and that everything else is somehow unreal or illusory. I could give another interpretation that is only slightly less uncharitable, that Thales thought that even solid objects like stones are in fact made of water somehow, that somehow water comes together in some rigid combination to create solid objects and in some other combination to create gaseous objects. This still seems to me to be fairly uncharitable to Thales. Both of these uncharitable interpretations have the vice that they cause us to think of Thales as being somewhat stupid or completely disconnected from the common sense reality that we all of us understand. It requires us to assume that we ourselves are far smarter and wiser than the person we're interpreting. While that may sometimes be the case, it seems it's unlikely to be the case with Thales, one of the 7 wise men of ancient Greece. So let's continue with some interpretations that might be a little bit more charitable toward him and see if we can unlock some of the truth that he's trying to express, even if mistakenly or imperfectly, in this statement that all is water. So I might reinterpret this statement more charitably by saying Thales thinks that water is the most fundamental of the 4 elements, that somehow the cosmos depends upon water, all life depends upon water, seems to come from water. This is going to be complicated and contextualized by the fact that all we have from Thales' writings are fragments, like this just single statement that all is water. But notice what a charitable interpretation invites me to do is to investigate more deeply, to discover more of the context. What did Thales think he was saying when he said this? Uncharitable interpretations tend to close off further lines of inquiry. That's one way to recognize them. The second example I'd like to give is a statement by the French revolutionary philosopher Rousseau, who famously began his work, The Social Contract, by writing, "Man is born free, yet everywhere he is in chains." So let's give some interpretations of this, both uncharitable and charitable. In an uncharitable sense, I could read Rousseau as saying that babies, right after they're born, are unrestricted. Nobody stops them from moving their limbs in whatever way that they want. They have a kind of meaningless freedom, right? It's worthless because unless they're fed, unless they're cared for right away, they're going to die. So, and I could say in a similar way, maybe the second half of this statement, man is everywhere in chains, means that adults are restrained, not literally in chains. That seems to be so uncharitable as to make the statement obviously false, but in some kind of figurative way. We're held down or held back. I think this interpretation of both halves of Rousseau's statement is still quite uncharitable. It doesn't really give us an insight into what he's trying to say. So let me try a more charitable interpretation. Perhaps Rousseau means by this that humans, by their very nature, when they're born, possess some kind of freedom. Now I want to ask, what kind of freedom is that? That's important for later. But civilization and society impose some kind of restraint upon us as we are adults. I might also interpret this statement still more charitably by saying that Rousseau is pointing out that culture and social convention limit our natural freedom in some radical fashion. This is the purpose of his using this evocative expression, man is in chains. He's held down by the weight of culture and rules that are imposed upon him that limit his natural freedom. I can now ask, is this correct? Does Rousseau have a correct view in general of the nature of human freedom, that we're born with it, that it's ours by nature, but that it is somehow limited or taken away from us by laws and social rules and conventions? I can only ask this question about the truth of Rousseau's theory after I've given a charitable interpretation that begins to open it up to me. If I rest content with my literal or uncharitable interpretation of what he says, I write him off as a kind of madman or idiot. And that's, again, one of the hallmarks of an uncharitable interpretation is that it closes off further inquiry and allows me to feel superior to someone without really giving me a clear understanding of what he's trying to do. So I've just given you two examples of both uncharitable and charitable interpretations of some claims from the history of philosophy. I hope you find this helpful for your upcoming writing assignment. Thanks for watching today. Goodbye.